All right, South Carolina and the SEC dragged down into the mud at Big Ten Media Days with Indiana head coach Curt Cignetti making jabs at the scheduling from not just South Carolina but across the board in the SEC. Is there any merit to it, or is it just complete and total bull?
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, and I hope everyone's having a fantastic Tuesday. Thank you for joining us and making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by anger and vitriol. I am fired up, and we got a good show for you today. We're not going to get into the sponsors until the first segment, but let me tell you how this is going to go. There were some words that were said from Curt Cignetti at Big Ten Media Days, and some other ones that were also brought up by Rhett Lashley from SMU over the course of the first couple days of media days for those two conferences in the ACC and the Big Ten. I'm going to react in the only way that I know how to. Probably angrily. I'm going to try my best not to say any cuss words so I can keep my job. But also, like I always say, with facts. So let's just get into this. What I always say, guys, you've heard me say it time and time again. If we are going to talk about college football, if we're going to talk about sports in general, we're going to do it with logical, reasonable, and factual information. And I fully understand the emotions that get involved in the college football, and I fully understand how that breeds narratives that become untrue. And one of my favorite things to do in this sport is to figure out proving those narratives wrong over and over and over again. For instance, this started about a decade ago, and it started with the Bama doesn't play anybody narrative that happened. And I only bring this part up because it feeds into exactly what we're talking about here. And I remember looking up at one point, and I was like, I feel like they play a pretty good schedule. And during the course of, I think, 2015 to 2022, they had ended up the whole idea that they hadn't played anybody. They had played, maybe it was 2015 to 2024, 2023. They had played a strength of schedule that was ranked in the top 7, 6 out of those 9 years, including the number 1 strength of schedule in the country twice in 2016 and another year. I think it was, I forgot the other year, but number 1 overall. The idea that things you don't like, especially in sports, those shape narratives, and they're lazy and they're stupid. And I have been a part of it. I have been a part of it for a long time. In terms of baseball, I hate the Yankees. I say it all the time. I hate the Yankees. I want them to lose every game they play. So when I was growing up, I would think of anytime I heard something about A-Rod, steroids, or whatever, it was like, oh, that's the only reason they win anything, blah, 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 blah. But this idea that the Big Ten of all people, are going to come out and decide to start this new narrative of the SEC doesn't play anybody, it is so beyond stupid. And so what we're going to actually do here in a fun little exercise is I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to point out all the reasons why it's not only not factual, but it's also completely irrational in the way that this is brought up. And I tell you what, this may sound dramatic, but that's fine because I'm a dramatic person. This idea that the SEC doesn't play anybody because they only play 8 conference games, where that has come from is because, in my opinion, it's come from people like Danny Cannell, people like the Big Ten, either homers or people that are Big Ten commissioners, coaches, all that kind of stuff from outside the SEC. It's not because they want to see the SEC play a 9th game. It's because they want to see the SEC lose. And that's fine. I totally get it. They have had their foot on the neck of college football for 20 years. And I'm fully aware they didn't win the last 2 national championships. But by the way, they had won 13 of the previous 17 and played in 16 of the previous 17. So if all of a sudden the dramatic fall off of the SEC is that they just didn't make it to a national championship game because they were beaten in the final 2 minutes of the semifinals to the eventual national champion 2 years in a row, Michigan over Alabama in the overtime of the Rose Bowl, and then Ohio State over Texas this year. If that's the case for the best example for the fall off of this conference, that's a pretty damn good fall off. There's a lot of other conferences that probably love to have that fall off that the SEC's had. But the quote that got me today, and we'll start with Curt Cignetti in Indiana. There are a few coaches I feel like in the realm of college football that have shown less substance with their words than ever. And I heard Shane Beamer talk about this last week, talking about the scheduling and what they have to do year in, year out, and who you're gonna play. Like South Carolina only plays 8 conference games. Sure. Now we know who those conference games are against. They got Alabama, they got Ole Miss, they got LSU on the road, they got Ole Miss on the road. We talked about that earlier. They got Oklahoma at home, right? And I'm sure I'm forgetting some others. Like they've got a murder's row of they got at A&M, and then by the way, in the non-con, they went out and scheduled Virginia Tech to start the year and Clemson to close the year because it's their in-state rivalry. Are you telling me that this magical 9th game that the Big Ten has somehow made, because Indiana's coach was put on the spot, and our own Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On College Football asked him about canceling the game against Virginia, because last week Indiana canceled their game against Indiana canceled their game against Virginia in the upcoming year. It's the 4th time they have canceled a game against a Power 4 opponent in as many years. They are replacing that Power 4 opponent with a FCS team, which is the 3rd time of those 4 games they've had to replace. They have chosen an FCS opponent. They went from a Power 4 team, which was, by the way, Louisville, Virginia, and Virginia. If you're scared to play Virginia and you have to go ahead and schedule an FCS team, what am I missing? So they've scheduled 3 FCS opponents of those 4. The one FBS opponent that they did schedule was Kennesaw State, who, by the way, guys, is going into year 2 of being an FBS program. Nothing that has been said of substance. And I point this out. Cignetti's response to the question was, well, we just thought we'd take an SEC-style approach to our schedule and go ahead and schedule some FCS games. What has happened with this entire argument I am not being dramatic when I say this, is this FCS game late in the year that the SEC has scheduled at times in Week 13 has somehow become the vessel for the argument against SEC playing only 8 conference game versus 9, right? Now keep in mind, you look at all the other metrics, strength of schedule, strength of record, no matter how you want to look at it, ranked teams, whether it's before the season or after the season. Like, any way you want to look at it, over and over and over again, you're talking about teams that are playing, like Arkansas. Half of Sam Pittman's games as a head coach at Arkansas are against ranked opponents. You know who's right behind him in the last 5 years against ranked teams? Shane Beamer was like 23. Like, what happens is the moment that that's brought up, the goalposts start being moved. And they start being moved in terms of, well, it's strength of schedule doesn't count because ESPN strength of schedule doesn't matter. Fine, find another metric. Well, those don't count because they're doing too much by saying that the SEC teams are ranked early on. If we're having to move the goalpost that much already to save your argument, which, by the way, at no point has been defending your own schedule ever. The only defense is, well, we play 9 games. If you're playing 9 games and it's Purdue, Northwestern, Minnesota, Wisconsin, like, what are we even Rutgers? What are we even talking about? And so what has happened is that people like Curt Cignetti and people like Tony Petitti, that is the commissioner of the Big Ten, they have gotten a bigger microphone. And there's a quote from American Gangster, I love this more than anything. It says that the loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room. They have become the loudest in the room. And they've been able to do so because so many people outside of this footprint in the SEC are tired of losing to teams from this conference. And so they've been like, yeah. Like, of course, they should be playing a ninth conference game. At no point is there any substance that's brought into the argument against what the SEC schedule is. Because the moment factual information is brought up is the moment they lose that argument. So what has essentially happened is you have figured out a way to find a scapegoat, to figure out a way to find one thing that you can hang your argument on, even though there's no argument to be made, and sit there and say, yep, they only play 8 conference games. That's bullcrap because we play 9, and they play an FCS game late in the year. They don't want to get into all the FCS teams that their own teams play. They don't want to get into the strength of schedule stuff. And they definitely don't want to get into the fact that you play less ranked teams over and over. Indiana didn't play a ranked opponent until Ohio State in week 12 of last year. By the way, that was their second to last game. They had a bye week beforehand, and it was the first time up until that point they had played a team with a winning record. And it was the second to last week of November. What are we arguing about? So, as I always say, the idea that somehow teams like South Carolina, teams like, I'm not going to bring Ole Miss into it, Georgia, LSU, I saw multiple people today bringing up LSU because they play 3 Louisiana State schools in their non-con. They also play at Clemson to start the year. But if we're going to talk about sports and college football, we're going to talk about it with factual information. And when we come back, I'm going to go down the list of the actual numbers of who these teams are playing in comparison to the SEC. Now, before we do that, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends from the Game Time app. And you guys have heard me talk about the Game Time app before. You're going to hear me talk about them again as soon as I catch my breath because I'm all fired up as usual. Listen, have you ever decided last minute you want to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands instead of at home. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come along with you. Game Time makes all of that possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple, point blank, period. Prices on the app actually drop closer that you get to the first pitch or a kickoff. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. I'll tell you what, my favorite thing with Game Time is you get the all-in ticket pricing up front, so there's no surprises. There's no surprises when you go to checkout. There's no hidden fees. You know exactly what you're getting by the time you get to hit purchase and get your tickets. So I've told you guys about this 1,000 times before. I'll tell you 1,000 times again because Game Time, as we're coming up on the season, is the best way to get your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off, and download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks. All right, so getting back into the scheduling thing, and I want to talk specifically about where it means to South Carolina, because the South Carolina part of this is the funniest part of anyone making this argument. There are several teams in this conference that have gone out of their way, even though that they're currently at eight conference games, knowing full well if they go to 9, they are going to be screwed because of what they have already put in place and the agreements they've already had coming into play. If they go to 9 conference games and South Carolina has built into the schedule a 9th SEC team and then Clemson, there is not anyone in the Big Ten that is going to compare with how difficult of a schedule that is. I know that because there's barely anyone that can compare to it now with 8, or when they play 8 games and they consider how difficult the schedule is already. South Carolina, for the next 7 years, they play 2 Power 4 opponents every single year through 2031. They are also scheduled to play 2 Power 4 opponents in 9 of the next 11. You go down the list of the SEC. Florida, in the next 9 years, they will play 2 Power 4s in 7 of the next 9. They'll play 3 Power 4 opponents in 2 of those years. Bama has 2 Power 4 non-conference games every single year until 2034. So you sit here and complain about the fact that they're not playing a 9th conference game, but oh, by the way, they're playing 10 Power 4 opponents every single year until 2034. Indiana's not doing that. Penn State's not doing that. So are we supposed to sit here and say, like, oh, you know what? This isn't fair because they're not playing a 9th conference game when they're still playing more Power 4 opponents than you? Like, what? And you're also doing it in a historically top-heavy conference, okay? Texas does not have 2 Power 4 opponents, but will play Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame over the next 5 years. Georgia has at least 2 Power 4 opponents every single year from 2026 to 2034. 3 of those 9 years, they play 3 Power 4 opponents. Okay? Now, Indiana's coach bringing this up is what sparked this fire in the first place about how pissed I was when I heard it. Because I've done the research, and I know what Indiana's played. And I'll take you through this entire thing again. They had games against Louisville, supposed to be home and home, and Virginia. 4 total games against Power 4 opponents that they canceled all 4. They replaced those games with Indiana State, Austin Peay, Western Illinois, and Kennesaw State. Last year, they didn't play a ranked opponent until November 23rd. That was week 12 of the season. Other Big Ten teams like Ohio State. Now, Ohio State, by the way, I will say they do a better job of scheduling than anyone else in this conference. But they still canceled games against Washington and 2 other two other non-Power 5 opponents or Power 4 opponents. Michigan canceled games against UCLA, Virginia Tech, and then replaced them with Hawaii and ECU. Michigan, by the way, going into last year, their non-conference opponents when they won the national championship were combined 11-24. 11-24. They didn't play a ranked opponent until mid-November when they played Penn State in Week 11. They won the national championship. So what are we doing here? Are you saying that we should schedule more tough games? Or are you saying, hey, the easiest way to get to a national championship is by doing the opposite of that? Because that's been the blueprint that's worked. Okay? Indiana was a top 5 team in the country last year, despite their strength of schedule being in the 80s before they played Ohio State. The 80s. Okay? And here's what I get back to. This idea that they're not, we're taking an SEC approach. No, you're not. Because there's not an SEC team in the country that you can name. And again, I'm asking for specific examples. I'm not saying make jokes and throw out blanket statements and bull blank like fodder. Give me, like, say it with your chest, man. Show your work. Show your work. I did. It's not hard to do. It's a simple Google. So Indiana goes into this season with the loudest mouth about SEC opponents and how these teams, South Carolina doesn't play this team, Alabama doesn't play this team, Georgia doesn't play this team. Georgia doesn't play a tough schedule this year, and then you look at what they have the next 9 years in a row. But let's hang on to this year alone. Because again, this giant body of work for 2 decades that the SEC's dominated, that's all gone away. Because 2 years now makes up for all of that. The goalposts move constantly. But with Indiana, here are the actual facts that go along with their schedules. Over the next 5 years, they have 13 games scheduled in the non-conference. 0 Power 4 opponents, 0 road games. They play 4 teams in the FCS. And of the 7 total FBS teams, which are all group of 5, by the way, of the 7 total they play, only 2 had a winning record a year ago. So, then you look at teams like Penn State. Teams that are also, like, and I'm using these 2 as examples because 1, Indiana opened their big fat mouth, and 2, Penn State is the team that is supposed to be the number 1 team in the country going into the year and the team that is projected to win this conference going in. Over the next 4 years, they have 12 games scheduled. 10 are at home, only 2 are against Power 4, and they're both against Syracuse. 2 are against FCS, and only 2 are on the road. One of those road games is at Temple, which is played in a neutral site in Philly. 8 FBS teams, 1 Power 4 team, 5 teams had 4 wins or less in the last year. Listen, and there are some teams. Ohio State's a team that deserves credit. Wisconsin has at least 1 Power 4 opponent in every single year until 2033. But let's go back to Michigan for a second as well, because Michigan's a team that, they played Texas last year. They're going to play Oklahoma this year, and they've got some teams on the horizon. But let's also not forget that from since 2019, barring starting the COVID year, they didn't go on the road in the month of September. They didn't play a road game in the month of September until September 30th of 2023 against 4-8 Nebraska. Think about what I'm saying. For 4 straight years, they didn't go on the road in any game in the entire month of September. Just home games. Playing one of the worst non-conference schedules imaginable, ECU, Hawaii, teams that were 11-21. They were 18-21 in 2023. They were 12-26 in 2022. This is their non-conference opponents' combined record. 12-26. Didn't play a ranked opponent until week 7. Played 2 ranked opponents all season long. 2023, they played 2 ranked opponents all season long. Michigan has played 7 total ranked opponents in the regular season over from 2021 to 2023. 6 of them, 6 of the 7 were named Ohio State or Penn State. What is that schedule without those people on it? So if it really does boil down to the fact that, we want better non-conference games, schedule them. Schedule them. Texas went to Michigan last year. Skull dragged them. Bama went to Wisconsin last year. 42-10. I don't see those teams coming down to the SEC. Texas goes up to Ohio State this year. I mean, Auburn and Penn State played a home and home, but like this entire idea that the SEC is not scheduling difficult opponents in non-conference games, and furthermore are scared to go up and play Big Ten teams, none of it is factually true, and that's the thing that drives me insane. That like. Again, we're looking at these ranked opponents, okay? These ranked opponents. Michigan from 2021 to 2023, they played 7 regular season ranked opponents. Penn State played 7 from 2022 to 2024, played 7 total ranked opponents. Ohio State during that time played 9, okay? But again, of the 7 Michigan played, 6 were named Penn State or Ohio State. Of the 7 that Penn State played, 5 were named Michigan or Ohio State. Of the 9 that Ohio State played, 3 were against Penn State, 2 were against Michigan, 2 were against Notre Dame. You look at teams that are comparable to that in the SEC, Georgia and Alabama. UGA played more ranked teams in 2023, right? The year that they went 13-1 and were left out of the playoff. UGA played more ranked teams in a 3-week span from November 4th to November 18th than Michigan did all season long. From 2021 to 2024, you look at those 2 teams specifically, because those are the 2 teams that are comparable to the top end of the Big Ten, Bama and Georgia. Georgia from 2021 to 2024 played 15 regular season ranked opponents. Alabama played 17. Those numbers are nowhere close to what those big 3 schools and Indiana, if you want to throw them in there, are playing in the Big Ten. Indiana doesn't have a win over a ranked opponent since the COVID year. This is a joke. This entire thing is a joke. And again, there's not an argument to be made because the moment that factual information is brought into the argument is the moment the argument falls flat on its face. So, I know that today's episode was not solely based off South Carolina. We will get back to that tomorrow. I'm fired up. It pisses me off because I'm tired of hearing about it because, again, we're not even talking about real things. We are just saying blanket statements and gaslighting the rest of casual fans across the country and saying, oh, yeah, I'm on board with that. I don't like them. What are we saying about them? Oh, they don't play anybody? Yeah, of course. Last but not least, let's not forget. Actually, we'll save this for the very last part. When we come back, my closing thoughts on this and how dumb it really, truly is. All right. Before we close out today's show, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at Monarch Money. Listen, I got a big day on Thursday. A lot of you know why. Very excited about it. We got a big move coming. I guess Saturday. We're moving Saturday. But if you ever wish managing your money felt easier, with Monarch Money it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also able to build wealth. I tell you what, I love the fact that they are able to hone in on specific things that I did not realize were costing me money. Subscriptions, things like Canva, things like duplicates of it. I didn't know this. This is going to sound stupid, but it's something I didn't know until I had Monarch Money. I had like 3 ESPN accounts, paying $9.99 a month for all of them. No clue. Now, listen, don't be a dummy like me. Be smart and take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Let's close out today's show with this. The final thing that pisses me off about this whole situation is there are teams like South Carolina, there are teams like Alabama and Georgia even, who doesn't need to schedule difficult games. Like, South Carolina and Georgia don't need to schedule those difficult games. And they already have built-in non-conference opponents, and in South Carolina's sake, one of the best teams in the country going into this season. There's no need to build in a 10th game that's against a Power 4 opponent, but they do, year in, year out. For the next 7 straight years, South Carolina will play a 10th Power 4 game, or 10th FBS opponent. I'm sorry, a 10th game against a Power 4 opponent when they don't need to. And here's the dumbest part of all of this. The idea that the SEC needs to play a ninth conference game stems from what? Because the Big 12 and the Big 10 did so. Each of those conferences did that on their own accord within the last decade. The Big 10 did it, I think, in like 2017 or something like that. The Big 12 did it, I think, even more recently. But they did that for their own financial interests. No one asked you to play 9 conference games. You did that because you wanted more money. And the moment you started playing a ninth conference game, you started complaining about the fact that, well, how come no one else does? I don't know. No one made you sign up for it. Like, no one asked you to go make your schedule more difficult than it was. The fact that nobody's having the conversation of, what if we move this game back down to 8? Because I don't care if you play an FCS game in the month of November. I don't care at all. I've already seen what your schedule is right now. And having the ninth Power 4 game in your own conference has done nothing to make it more difficult. So, again, you are asking the rest of the country to buy into this belief that, oh, well, the SEC needs to follow suit. They need to do this. And here's the worst part, guys, is that they are going to. The SEC, like, they 1,000% are going to barter this entire format that they've had for years and years and years. They're going to barter this for a fourth team getting into the playoff. Make no mistake about it, that day is coming. But you are asking everyone else to follow suit with your own idea that you did just because you wanted to make more money for your conference. And then found a way, because the rest of the country was also tired of getting beat by this other conference, you found a way to make them the scapegoat and them the bad guy, and now everyone's going to follow suit with what you need. It is the most absurd, gaslighting, bull blank that has happened in college sports in the last several decades. And no one seems to be talking about it. And if they are, no one seems to be talking about it with any kind of factual information that you heard today. So, that is all for today. I'll calm down. We'll be back tomorrow. Hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see y'all then. Go Cox.